Wesley Snipes. He is a very good actor, and I've seen a couple of his movies, not just his action movies, and he is a very good actor, and as for his action films, I love him as an action star. One of his earliest action roles in Demolition Man, I thought he was the best thing about the movie. Like, he was just such an enjoyable, great villain in that. A lot of people said he was over the top, but I thought he was just so much fun as the villain, and he just brought a good twisted sense of humor to that film. And he made many other films afterwards as a leading action star, but the movie that really made him a superstar in the action genre was Blade. The plot of Blade is a vampire hunter hunting down every vampire he can in the world, trying to wipe them all out. And the twist is he himself is half human, half vampire. So he has all their powers and can fight them mano a mano, but he can also walk about during the day. And everybody asks these questions, so I'll answer them. How is he half vampire? Well, the film shows that Blade's mother was bitten when she gave birth to him, hence he got all the powers. And also, next to Blade having all the vampires' powers, he also has their thirst for blood, something that he tries to eliminate from his system as best he can, because he doesn't want to become just like them. He hates vampires, and so he develops a serum that's kind of like synthetic blood that he injects that can get him through the bloodlust when it comes. And the movie Blade, it is a great, incredible action horror movie. And a little backstory, the movie is based on a Marvel comic series. And I'm not a comic book fan, I don't really read comics, so I'm just going to come at this as a movie on its own. As an action film, this movie is just spot on. It has amazing fight scenes, such as fist to fist, bullets, and if you can see, Blade's katana. Yeah, like Wesley Snipes fights vampires with a samurai sword. And the action scenes are well choreographed, well done, they are just terrific. And as a horror movie, it's primarily an action movie, but the scenes where they try to be, I wouldn't say scary, more creepy, are very well done. They're very well executed. Like, the gore effects are pretty incredible. They are grisly at times, really grisly, cringy, and the imagery of the vampires, some of the vampire effects, makeup, and morphing, and the creature effects that they show what the vampires can fully become are pretty good. And the film has some very good drama moments as well, that I'll get into in a little bit. The people who made the movie Blade did a very fantastic job. The writer of this movie was David S. Goyer, who is one of the hottest writers in Hollywood right now. He's kind of the go-to guy on superhero movies. He has written many superhero films he's written every Blade movie. And he's also been the writer on the Dark Knight Trilogy with Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan. And he also wrote Man of Steel and is currently writing the Batman vs. Superman movie that's going to come out next year. And a lot of people are mixed on David S. Goyer. Some think the writing's not the best, like in the dialogue department. And after seeing many of the films he's worked on, some of the dialogue can be a little stiff from certain characters, a little goofy, a little hokey. but usually it comes off pretty good, pretty well. And the director of Blade was Stephen Norrington, who hasn't directed a movie in a long time. After Blade, he made The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and apparently filming of that movie was very horrible, and it just put him off from directing ever again. So, yeah. But yeah, I thought David S. Goyer did a great job on this movie as the writer. This film had great characters, great story, and just had the right twists. And there's a funny story about a meeting between Goyer and Norrington. David S. Goyer, when you see a picture of him, he's kind of skinny, bald, has a bit of stubble. He looks like the kind of geek that would love comics and would write movies about them. Like, just seems like a big comic book fan. Like, he fits the bill. And a surprising thing that you find out about him is that he has tattoo sleeves all over his arms. Like, from his wrist all the way up to here, he just is covered in tattoos of all colors. And when he met Stephen Norrington, apparently Goyer was wearing a short sleeve shirt, and Norrington started teasing him, saying, "Tattoos aren't tough." And then he took off his shirt, showing that his body was covered in piercings. This is what Goyer says happened during a meeting, and I think it's a funny story. And for the cast of Blade, Wesley Snipes, as Blade, he is just a perfect badass action hero. He's tough, no nonsense, he hardly ever smiles, and, well, he does have a little bit of humor at times, but mainly he's just kind of a grump type character who just is always kind of serious, and he's someone that is very intimidating. And most of the time, he always wears shades. Not as big as these, but he still wears them. And, some of his line delivery is very emotionless, some would say maybe flat. But in this case, with this character and the whole story setting, I think it really fits. And he just is ripped to the limit that a human being can be ripped before they get into steroids. And his muscle definition in this movie is just incredible. Like, he's huge all over and very sexy. For all the women who aren't into the gory horror or action type of movies, this is your reason to come see it. And, even though he is very tough and doesn't show much emotion, he has a few moments that show the humanity in him. And he does a very good job at conveying that kind of acting in the middle of this otherwise very tough role. And the supporting cast in this movie is also very good. Everybody, well, most. All the main players do a pretty good job. Blade is not a completely serious action movie. Some scenes in Blade are a little sillier than others, but never too silly, like they keep a good flow going. Aside from a few silly moments, the only other thing I have to complain about are a few weird edit scenes. Nothing too serious, just like a few jump cuts maybe. And some of the characters, like I said, with Goyer in his movies, there's a few silly dialogue scenes. but nothing to ruin it. Like, it's a comic book based movie, superhero movie, and you can expect a little silliness in them. Like, Blade is grislier than the Dark Knight, but it doesn't. But you know going in what to expect. It's marketed as a fun vampire kick ass movie, and that's what you get. It's not over marketed as serious as like the Dark Knight was, being very serious and having some really dumb moments in them. It just works fine, and the supporting cast, though, like the main plot, aside from Blade hunting vampires while being part vampire himself, is he's going after a particular group of vampires led by a vampire named Deacon Frost, who is out to become a vampire god. And in order to do so, he must do this ceremony that requires the blood of a daywalker vampire. And guess who's the closest one to him? Deacon Frost is played by Stephen Dorff. And I haven't seen a lot of Stephen Dorff stuff. He has the nickname The Dorff given to him by many other people. And he does a very good job as the villain. Like, he's young, and for this type of character, that could be kind of a drawback, having a very young villain. I think he's younger than Wesley. He is a few years younger than Wesley Snipes, but despite that, he pulls it off. Like the idea is Deacon Frost has been around for a very long time, but I don't know if I would see that in him entirely because he acts young. But nonetheless, he is still pretty menacing and very smart in certain areas. And I thought Stephen Dorff, he pulls it off, and he is very menacing and evil, but at times cool, slick, and, well, he doesn't carry the complete attractiveness of Wesley Snipes. He has his own brand of sexiness at times. Not as strong as Snipes, but you can see a little bit in him, the kind of rugged sex appeal. And yeah, he is a good villain. And there's a great scene where he is talking to this vampire council, where apparently vampires make deals with the humans, like the big politicians, to keep a peace. And Frost does not like the deal between the humans and the vampires. As he puts it, we should be ruling the humans. For fuck's sake, these people are food. And a fun fact for those who are into the cult horror genre, the leader of the Vampire Council is played by Udo Kier. Yeah, and if you don't know who Udo Kier is, look his name up and find out what he's done and go watch some of the movies he's been in. He's a pretty cool guy. Like, he's a pretty cool horror actor. He's Austrian. He's been in a ton of films. Look him up and find out who he is. Another big plot point is that Blade rescues a woman doctor from the vampires, and he kind of takes her on as a sidekick. She's played by Nibushi Wright. I don't know how to pronounce the way it's spelled. Unless a name is pronounced the way it's spelled, it's hard for me to properly pronounce it. But this actress, her character, the doctor, is named Karen. Some people have a little issue with her, but I thought she was a pretty good sidekick character. Like, she helped Blade, she actually did stuff for him, like, she was there for more than just to look sexy. She is, but that's not her main reason, and she carries a lot of good strength. Like, even though she gets into trouble, she can pull through, and she's not the most badass chick in an action movie, but she has just enough to be a good... She's the kind of sidekick you'd want to have. Always have your back and be able to pull you out of a bad situation when you need to be pulled out. And a pretty cool thing is that despite being a beautiful young woman, she and Blade do not have any sexual chemistry or tension together, which is pretty interesting. Like, they do not get together really, and I won't spoil it all, but for the most upfront scenes, they don't really share that. They have chemistry, but not in a sexual sense. And they don't head in the direction of ever becoming a couple. They just work as partners, and you see a friendship develop. And that's pretty cool. Like, you don't see that often in action movies, and it works very well. And next to the character Karen, Blade also has kind of an older mentor type character, like a lot of action movies and superhero films do. A character named Whistler, played by the great singer-actor Chris Christopherson. And as Whistler, Chris Christopherson, he is honestly my most favorite part about the Blade movies. He is a gruff, tough old man, and for a guy in his age, and even now, he's in very good shape. He has a lot of good muscle himself, and he has long hair, and he's the kind of old man who, like, you feel like you could learn from him. Like, he has a lot to say, and he is badass. He fires guns, he fights, he helps Blade out as well as Karen. Whistler is just, he is awesome. He's the kind of old man you'd want to hang out with, just talk to, because you feel like he'd be fun and you could just benefit from being around him. And the only other actor in this film who I feel really is good is Donald Logue as Quinn, who is Deacon Frost's sidekick, kind of like Karen and Whistler are to Blade. And the Quinn character is pretty obnoxious, like he's always acting goofy like, yeah! Or, yeah, he just talks like that, and he just chuckles like a buffoon. But even though that usually kind of annoys me when they have those over obnoxious characters, and there's a lot in the Blade movies, but this particular character didn't annoy me. This is like the one in a million. He actually makes me laugh, like he's a good comic relief in the middle of all the action and the gore and the intensity. And Donald Logue, like, you would know him as the father from the old show Grounded for Life, and recently he's been on episodes of Law and Order Special Victims Unit. But yeah, as Quinn, he's pretty hilarious. Like, there's a scene where he is with Frost, and throughout the film, Quinn has lost a hand, each hand, in one fight scene than the other, and Frost, for some reason, suddenly is like, hold out your hand, and holds a sword to it, and Quinn's nervous, and then Frost is like, just kidding, and Quinn's like, that's funny! that's great! It's funny when you see it. I can't really imitate that laugh he does, just so obnoxious and loud, and genuinely enjoyable. And this is the spoiler card, and when I hold this up again, it means that the talk involving spoilers is over. The connection between Blade and Whistler is, like I said, Whistler's my favorite part of the series, and the connection between him and Blade is a very good and powerful one, like Bruce Wayne and Alfred in Batman. Like, Whistler is a father figure to Blade. He's taken care of him and raised him and taught him everything he knows. And Blade, at times, just sees their relationship as mentor and student and weapons maker and fighter. But there's a scene towards the end of the film. Frost attacks Whistler, and he is pretty much broken and dying at this point. And Blade goes to Whistler as he is lying hurt and bleeding, and as Whistler tells him what he needs to know before he dies, tells him what the plan of Frost is. Blade looks at him, listening silently, and with a tissue just lightly dabs the wounds, even though he probably knows Whistler doesn't have a chance. He's doing this out of care and love as a son or a kid would have to their parent. And it is a really touching but sad scene. Whistler's death scene is very tragic because throughout the film you've really grown to love him and you really enjoy his scenes. He is just such a great character, and I got really pissed off at what they did in the later movies with him, but I'll get to that. And it's a tragic scene, but a touching scene, and shows a lot of subtle but very well done meaning character development. I really liked the character and the relationship these two had. It really worked. Now that I got that out of the way, if I have any final thoughts, Blade is a good film. I would give it about 8, an even 8 out of 10. Oh, fuck it. I give it 8.4 out of 10. It's great. I love it, and anyone who loves a good action horror film with gore and kick-ass fighting and likable characters, they will love it. Oh, as a side note, Tracy Lords is in this movie, playing a character named Raquel. Just a fun little fact. For those who don't know, Tracy Lords is a former porn star who has made a somewhat successful career in movies and TV. Mainly in TV. In movies, she's mainly been small and supporting. But, yeah, she's in this movie. And I don't remember seeing her face. Like, there was this very sexy vampire chick who, throughout the film, pretty much wears kind of a... I guess, she looks like she's wearing a wet t-shirt, but she's played by an actress named Arlie Jover. That character was named Mercury. I don't remember seeing Lord's character, Raquel, and so I guess wasn't really that big of a character or that important. The sex levels in this film aren't huge. Like, yeah, you have some sexy women, and you got Snipes, a few shirtless scenes in his ripped glory, but the sex levels aren't huge. There is one, and I was hoping to mention this, there is one sensual scene in this movie. Well, they try to make it sensual, but it also has a theme of borderline... It comes off as... The scene shows, I guess, insensual attraction between one character to another, and they film it in a way that is sensual, but with the incest tone to it. It's kind of, you don't know what to think of it, and that's kind of the last thing I have to say. Blade is a great film. It has a lot of good to it. There is pretty much no flaws that will turn you off. Blade was just enjoyable for me, and anyone who loves the action film genre will love this. Superheroes, all that. 4 years after Blade, there was Blade 2. And Blade 2 had a new director come on board. Like I said, Stephen Norrington, he only made the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen after Blade, and he just didn't want to come back. But the director they got was just, you couldn't pick a more perfect director for this type of movie. Guillermo del Toro. I hope I pronounced that right. Like I said, I'm not good at pronouncing a name if I'm reading it and it doesn't sound like the way it's spelled. But yeah, that's him, the director of Hellboy, Pan's Labyrinth, and Pacific Rim. This movie, Blade 2, was the film he made before he took on Hellboy, and it definitely has the Hellboy feel to it. Hellboy is my favorite superhero movie of all time, and this movie definitely has the theme and the feel of Hellboy, but it also still feels like it has the same flow and direction of the first Blade movie, but it feels like Hellboy. And okay, I'm gonna get into it. A new breed of vampires has risen, and this new type of vampires is stronger than regular vampires. Like, they actually feed on vampires themselves and humans, and the vampires, realizing that they could become extinct or become one of these new stronger monsters, form an uneasy truce with Blade. And so now you have Blade working with the vampires who he's been hunting all of his life, and that is a very cool idea, and it's cool to see how they pull it off. So obviously there's going to be a lot of tension between Blade and these characters, and there's a lot of cool twists throughout the film. A lot of cool plot twists that show that there's more than meets the eye for both ends of characters. And Snipes returning, he doesn't have the same sex appeal he did in the first film. Like, he comes off as just more tough and fighting. I guess just the way he was shot in the first film looks sexier, but here, he's still awesome here, but he's just a pure fighter, and that's what most will come to see anyway. And he has the sword, and he kicks fucking ass. He just brings it all. I love the critics quote on this DVD is from Roger Ebert, and here's what it says: "Pure action, bloody well done." I love that. The main villain in this film, who is the new breed of vampire type, and they are referred as Reapers. The main villain is played by Luke Goss. I hope that's how his last name is pronounced. And he was also the main villain in Hellboy 2. And in both movies, he is a very good villain. He is otherworldly in both films. He is menacing, but he has depth to him. And in a way, in Hellboy 2, he had a lot of depth. In Blade 2, he's mainly menacing, but he shows some... There are some brief scenes of him that show some, I wouldn't say humanity, but just show something that could make you possibly for 2 seconds, probably just 2 seconds, understand him a little. But he is great, and his opening scene has him killing a vampire going, "I hate vampires," and just biting in. The opening of this film, after showing the introduction of the villain Nomak, shows Blade explaining that in the last film, they had the powerful death scene with Whistler, and in the second film, like, you have to really go back and watch. Whistler didn't just die. He had a gun that he was going to use to kill himself so he wouldn't come back as a vampire. But we never actually saw him shoot himself in the head. And the opening of the second film, Blade talks about how Whistler actually is still alive and he has become a vampire. And he is out to find him and try to bring him back and make him human again. And this is obviously the writer, David S. Goyer, working hard to bring Whistler back, because we all love Whistler, and it was awesome to bring him back. And the way they brought him back was very well done. When they find him, he is a vampire, but they find a way somehow to turn him human again, and the way it works out was pretty good. Surprisingly, they didn't use him as much in this film as you would think, as I would have hoped, considering all they went through to bring him back. But I would say, in the end, he had enough good moments to really make up for what little scenes he had in between the beginning and the end. There was a great moment where he says to Blade, who is in a muscle shirt with his sword, and Whistler above goes, "Hey kid," and he just throws him his shades. Blade catches it and just... The action scenes in Blade 2 are, like the first film, spectacular. And after seeing the Hellboy movies first before the Blade movies, I know Guillermo del Toro can really do great action scenes. And there's a amazing chase scene halfway into the movie where Blade chases the villain Nomak, and this is the first time they've met. The scene goes on for several minutes, and blood is just pumping as you watch it. It's all over the place, and it goes into many areas, and it works out just spectacularly. It works out just great. The supporting cast in this movie, like the first one, they all do a great job. The vampires who they work with, they have their own type of leader, who's played by Ron Perlman. He plays a vampire named Reinhardt, and Ron Perlman, he has a great presence. Even when he's a bad guy, you just love to watch him because he looks so cool. He has his own shades that he wears, and he has a tough presence, but Blade gets the better of him in many scenes. Kind of makes him his bitch for a moment in one scene. But even then, after that, Ron Perlman just brings enough to make the character so awesome to watch, even though he's a bad guy and you will hate him. Perlman, his best line in the whole film is where he says to Blade, "Well, like my daddy said, before he killed my mom, want something done right? You gotta do it yourself." There's also a badass woman vampire in this, played by Lenore Varela. I think that's how you pronounce it. And she, unlike the Karen character in the first Blade, who isn't back in this one and never explained what happened, but this character, Nissa, she is, unlike Karen in the first film, she and Blade share a lot of very good chemistry that is obviously heading towards the relationship area. And it's interesting because Blade hates vampires and he grows an attraction to this one, and it's obvious she's not as evil as the other vampires. She has some sympathetic scenes, and not gonna spoil it, but her last scene is beautifully shot and very touching. And lastly, Norman Reedus, who movie fans will know from The Boondock Saints and TV fans will know from The Walking Dead, plays kind of a new sidekick in this film named Scud, a pot-smoking weapons expert. Oh yeah. And he's pretty funny, pretty enjoyable, a little annoying at times, but nothing too bad. He has a great line that, since David S. Goyer has also written The Dark Knight, well, participated in writing the Dark Knight trilogy. When Blade comes back after being away for a while, Scud says, "The Dark Knight returns." Also funny, there's actually a comic book with that title. Blade 2 is a great sequel, and it's just as great as the first film. I would give it, I would say 8.5 out of 10. This is fucking awesome. Well, now we're on to the movie that everyone says is the worst in the Blade trilogy. Blade cunt raping Trinity. Whenever I watch a movie, I always look for some good parts in it, and generally I don't really hate that many movies, even if I realize they're not good. But this movie really... there are good parts to it, but they're in between a bunch of horrible fucking shitty parts. And this movie is just unbearably terrible in certain times. Generally owing to some pretty horrible characters. And the premise is that Blade is being hunted by the FBI that think he's a mass murderer, and a bunch of vampires have arisen, get this, Dracula from an ancient pyramid tomb in Syria. That's what the opening says. And I'll do a better job this time. Unmute it when I hold this up, and I will hold it up. I said I hated what they did with Whistler back when I talked about the first movie in the later series, and this is really fucking upsetting. Chris Christopherson is given second billing behind Wesley Snipes in this, but they kill Whistler off about 20 minutes into the movie, and he and Blade have a very touching scene where he says to Blade, "You're like a son to me, Blade. I'm sorry I got old on you." They pretty much kill him off after that. I wouldn't have minded if they had waited maybe a little bit longer and they had made it a heroic death or had some poignancy to it, like in the first film when they had a very well done death scene. But in this one, it's not a death of glory. It is pathetic and embarrassing, and the character deserved a much better end. They just killed him off like that. David S. Goyer, he wrote all three Blade movies, and many people have said this. Goyer's a great writer, but don't give him full control. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but I feel like I read that he decided to get Whistler out and add many more side characters to be Blade's sidekicks. That was just really pisses me the fuck off. The character was a fan favorite. I love the character, and David S. Goyer decided, fuck him. He just got rid of him, and I feel like, doesn't he know his own series? Like, does he know that people loved him? Like, I know Blade's the main thing, but Whistler was a huge part of the series. I just hated that, and a twist in the middle of this movie is that Whistler had a daughter out of wedlock, and everyone's mentioned this, and I will too, but briefly. In the first film, Whistler revealed that his wife and daughter were killed by vampires, and that is why he hunts them. So, yeah, adding that, like, it's just like a last-minute rewrite, and that was what it was. Goyer admitted this, and that it was put in when they couldn't use the original female character, so they put it in that Whistler had a daughter. She's played by Jessica Biel, and I admit, she is a good, badass supporting character, but still, knowing that part about her being his daughter that we never even knew the fuck about, that pisses me off. But she genuinely has some very good, badass scenes in this, and I feel it's a good character, but they shouldn't have put that part in. I just hated how they treated Abraham Whistler. He was a great character, and Chris Christopherson is a great actor. He is a cool old man, badass, and this is not how they should have ended his arc. Okay, I'm done there. Aside from Wesley Snipes returning, like, Wesley Snipes' behavior on Blade Trinity, from what I've heard, was pretty shitty. Like, everybody has talked about this, but apparently Wesley Snipes, he acted like an egotistical douchebag during filming. He refused to come onto set many days, forcing them to use body doubles and then digitally put Snipes' face on the double. And this had been done on Blade 2 as well, but for that, he had a good reason. He was making 3 films that year. Here, he was just being an asshole. I don't know, like, apparently he had a huge ego wave that, like, the kind Stallone had when he made Cobra. I don't know. And in the film, he's still kind of Blade, but he just seems a bit more of a jerk. Like, David S. Goyer not only wrote but directed this movie, and unlike the first two that had a dark, otherworldly, gothic feel, this film is just a straight-up fucking action movie. No other way to put it. It's just balls to the walls over the top. And some action scenes are good, but they're just... This movie, it's pretty pretentious, full of itself, and it's hard, and you can't take it seriously when it has all these stupid, goofy, retarded moments in it. Like, there are just so many retarded scenes, and even though the first two had some goofy moments, the ones here are just unbearable. It's hard to describe. Like, there's a scene where the villain, Dracula, goes to a store run by some goth people, and he sees the merchandise, and this is actually has started out as a good scene with him seeing just how people don't take the idea of Dracula seriously. Dracula whoopee cushions, Count Chocula, dolls, lunchboxes, and this is a really stupid moment. A Dracula-themed vibrator that has little fangs in it. Fucking dumb. Apparently, Wesley Snipes, he accused David S. Goyer of being racist during filming, even though they had worked on the other films and gotten along very well. And I know there's two sides to everything, but I read that Goyer was a victim of severe anti-Semitism bullying. So, no, I don't. I doubt that he was racist to Wesley. One of Blade's many sidekicks in this film is a character that was apparently big in the comics named Hannibal King. I don't think it has any relation or inspiration from Hannibal Lecter, but this character was apparently a favorite among the comic books. And they got Ryan Reynolds to play him. And I like Ryan Reynolds in some of his comedies. Like, he was funny in the very gross Van Wilder. And I've seen part of him in The Proposal with Sandra Bullock, and I like what I saw there to a sense. Like, he's good in some things, but in Blade Trinity, he doesn't seem to realize that this role was obviously supposed to be, like, badass. He just comes off as a comedian. But he is definitely the sexiest. Has the sexiest, most toned, well done bod in this movie of all the dudes. And there is that. For women, gay men, and bi men, he has a good definition, all the right muscles in all the right places. But as an actor and as an action hero, he fucking sucks. He is just annoying. He's obnoxious. And he always is wisecracking and being a wise-ass douche to all the other characters, picking on others. And then there's Dominic Purcell, who a lot of people seem to have an issue with. And he plays Dracula. I'm a little mixed on Dominic Purcell. For one, I agree, I do not buy him as Dracula. For main reason, he looks too young. Like, he looks like he's very huge and very buff, very dreamy looking, and I'm not against having a young actor play Dracula, but him as Dracula, he's too young. He just doesn't look, and he is intimidating. Like, he can be very menacing. He is actually pretty scary looking in many scenes, but I just don't buy him as Dracula. As a villain, he does have some very well done scenes, and he does have some good effect in certain moments. But overall, most of the rest of this film, it just fails. It just fails in a very shitty way. But he does have good scenes, and I like him better than most people probably like Dominic Purcell in this movie. And he is a pretty beautiful man, I have to admit. Final thoughts on the actors in this movie. Parker Posey, and I haven't seen her in a lot of stuff, like just Blade Trinity and kind of Superman Returns. And she plays like the lead female vamp in this movie, who's kind of like Dracula's lover in a sense. She is kind of the main villain, and I hated her in this movie. She was unbearable. She was annoying. Her character, Danica Talos. Danica is supposed to be like this most feared woman, femme fatale vampire. But I don't think she's scary. She's just annoying. And she doesn't act really like this fearful vampire. She acts more like this snarky, full of himself, goth bitch character. Like, she is a real bitch, and sometimes she just becomes this insufferable cunt in this movie. There are some actresses when they not for all actresses, but there's some roles an actress plays where the way their face looks and the way they walk, it just screams nothing but fucking bitch. That is what Parker Posey does in Blade Trinity. They just make her look all pale, white, to really look like and she's paler and whiter than all the other vampires in this film. Too many fucking things to go over. But, yeah, and she has fangs in every scene. And a big problem with the fangs in this movie, that whenever she talks, like, not only does she always sound bitchy enough, like, she just acts like, nah, that's her personality in the whole film. But when she talks, you hear an audible lisp. Like, it's obvious those fangs are making it hard for her to talk. That's... God, I just fucking hated her in this. I will say this. If there's a pretty actress in a movie, even if she's pretty or beautiful, if her character is a bitch or a cunt, I don't overlook that. I think of them as this unlikable character that I just want to see fucking die. And that was her, but I admit, she is pretty cute. Pretty cute to look at. Like, if you pause and look at her just with the fangs and the colored eyes, she's a pretty sexy vampire. Like, my first thought when I'm not suffering through her horrible performance in this, she looks like she could suck a dick. Hey, when you watch Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, and you see this scene with Dracula's brides, you'll never look at a fanged lady vampire the same way again. Just saying, she did a horrible acting job. She was just terrible, but I will say, she had a sexy look. And final thoughts. I give this movie 4.2 out of 10. And that's being fair. This movie was bad, and Guillermo del Toro almost came back. He considered directing Hellboy and Blade Trinity at the same time, but he chose Hellboy. Hellboy alone was the best decision. And this has been the episode on the Blade Trilogy. I hope you liked it.